Hi, everyone. Thank you for coming and watching this video. Today, I'm very happy to do an interview with Dr. Matt Strauss, who is representing the Conservative Party for Kitchener, South, and Hespeler riding. My name is Tony Rossel, and I am the publisher of Neighbours of Hespeler Village, the local magazine that goes out here in Hespeler. And so, Matt, thank you very much for meeting with me today.
Thank you for having me. It's a real pleasure to see you.
Awesome. So because I am a talkative person and I'm super open and I'm very agreeable, I am purposely just going to stick to asking questions because I don't want there to be any bias whatsoever. And I just want you to speak for yourself. And if people have any questions about what you say, they can reach out and talk to you directly, and the two of you guys can hopefully come to some type of conclusion or whatever.
Absolutely.
Awesome. Okay, for the first question, it's can you introduce yourself and share why you decided to run for office?
Okay, so my name's Matt. I was born in Kitchener, but I grew up in Hespeler. We moved here when I was 4 or 5. I remember I had my 6th birthday party on Darren Crescent, where I grew up. And Hespeler is the best place in the world to raise a family. I had a wonderful childhood. I did Boy Scouts at St. Andrew's Presbyterian. I eventually became a lifeguard at the Johnson Center. I went to university early. I got in when I was 15. I was a very bookish kid, I would say. So therefore I was commuting to the University of Waterloo for undergrad. Initially, my mom had to drive me from Darren Crescent to UW. By the end, I could drive myself. And then I got into medical school. So I went away for, I guess, a total of 9 years at Western, McGill, and then back to Western. I became a specialist in critical care. The first place that I came to work in the ICU, once I had all my schooling done, was Grand River. And I've been part-time at Grand River over the last 13 years. I've been full-time at Gulf General. I was the chief of the ICU for many years. I love teaching. I love thinking and speaking and interacting with people. So one of the honors of my life was I was on faculty at the McMaster Waterloo campus and taught many medical students over the years. So if you have a young doctor in the community, maybe under 35, there's a good chance I taught them at some point. I met my wife, fell in love with her. We have 2 kids. We have an 8-year-old German Shepherd. We live here in Hespeler now. Right before the pandemic, I had gone to journalism school, and then during the pandemic, I did a lot of writing. Initially for the Spectator in the UK, also for a magazine called City Journal in Manhattan, but also the Toronto Sun, the Toronto Star, the National Post. I was interviewed on CDC and Global News about my and a whole bunch of podcasts about my views about the pandemic. And in some ways, I was critical of the government. And when I see a problem, I do my best to fix it. So I became a public health official just 45 minutes south of here in Haldeman, Norfolk, for the second half of the pandemic. And that was one of the proudest accomplishments of my life. So I really wanted to pursue pandemic policies based on calm, courage, consent, and compassion. And after a year and a half of pursuing that as a public health official, we had a 30% lower COVID mortality in that jurisdiction. So that was my most recent kind of professional activity prior to going to politics. But now I'm raising my family here in Hespeler. It's my hometown. It would be the honor of my life to serve as your representative in Ottawa.
Okay. So was there a defining moment that made you decide to enter politics?
I think throughout the pandemic, I found that I was good at standing up for what's right, for having open and honest conversations, sometimes debates with folks. And there's a lot of heat. You get a lot of criticism anytime you do anything publicly, but politics would be one of those. Public health would be another one. Writing in the newspaper would be yet another one. And I just found that I'm able to take the heat. I'm able to stand up for what is right. And I was able to have a really big impact, both in like that little corner in Haldeman, Norfolk of the province, but also in the province, across the province. I would say on many of the group meetings all public health officials had, at first sometimes it was 34-1 across the province for the voice of agreement, but by the end it was more like 20-14 on my side. So I think I can make change by being reasonable and open and honest with folks, and that's what I hope to pursue.
Okay, thank you. So the next question is, this riding includes both Hespeler and South Kitchener. So what does Hespeler mean to you personally? And I think you alluded to that a little bit already. And how do you see your role in serving both communities?
Yeah, I think the phrase I used was the best place in the world to raise a family. And so I knew once I was ready to start a family, there was one place in the world I wanted to do that. And it's so meaningful to me to take my daughter to the same pool that I learned to swim at, to take her to the same public library where I used to go to reading circle. And I just think it's so special to have like the small town feel where people look after their neighbors, where they know each other's children, where there's street hockey and it's not just that it's about families, but it's about helping other people's families and being it's an incredible small town feel 45 minutes from the big city. And I don't know where else you can get that on earth. Kitchener is where I was born. Kitchener is where my dad's side came in the 1840s. And it's where my mom came as a refugee in the 1960s. So Kitchener to me is about people from all over the world coming, sometimes with the shirt on their backs and not much else, and making a life for themselves. And I guess it's hard for me to separate the two locations, because my whole life, my grandfather still lived in that house that he bought in 1968, and we were there three times a week. I guess I've always felt connected more to multicultural communities in Kitchener because of where my mom was from, and we had kind of sort of cultural events there. But I mean, very similarly, it's people who love their kids and want to have a great community to raise them in.
Yeah, perfect. Okay, thank you. So what are your top 3 priorities if elected?
So being a physician, having made my career in healthcare, obviously I have some expertise or maybe deep knowledge about what needs to be done, and the state of the system is not right. Like it fundamentally in Canada, the government makes a contract with us. You pay your taxes, you get proper healthcare. This time is personal. Some folks will know from your magazine and from my social media. My wife almost died in the emergency room recently after spending 6 hours not being seen, bleeding 2 days after our son was born. So, I mean, I've seen a lot of heartache, a lot of terrible things from the inadequacies of our healthcare system. But over the last 6 months, it's felt more intensely personal than it ever could have before. So I feel like I know how to fix it. It's not going to be fixed in one day. There's not just one thing that it needs. But I really feel like that's where my passion and my knowledge is, and I would be really happy to serve, because it's not right what's happening right now, is what I would say. Beyond that, I've knocked on now more than 20,000 doors. There's about 40,000 doors in the riding, and I mean to get to all of them before the votes are counted. And folks are really stressed out about cost of living and housing. It's not right what has happened to house prices. It's not right that basically nobody under 40 can afford a home unless they get a large inheritance. Speaking of Hespeler as a place to raise a family, it's very hard to start a family if you don't have a house to keep them in. So that's been the overwhelming concern of the community and the people whose doors I've knocked. And I know we can make a difference that way. I've become friends over this period with, I would say, small-time developers, not people who make subdivisions, but people who buy a tear down and try to make a triplex, and the red tape and the regulation that they've had to deal with. One man, he bought a plot of land, he wanted to put 36 townhouses on it, and he had to fight bureaucrats for 2 years because they only wanted to let him have 16. And he's like, I'm trying to build houses for young families in a housing crisis, and we just need some leadership, I think, to plow through some of that and get people into houses. And then, of course, all this nonsense with the USA and the tariffs, that's an overwhelming concern for people. And I think I think the set of policies that got us into this mess are not going to get us out. So I think we could make some changes there and steer through this crisis. And I'm passionate about doing that.
Okay. So you said our current policies, were there any in particular that you could briefly discuss?
Our current policies vis-a-vis the USA and tariffs, you mean?
Yeah.
So I'll give my kind of overview of that situation. Donald Trump is a bully. I was bullied at school once. I mean, I was 3 years ahead. You can imagine that. One thing I learned from that experience was bullies look for weakness. They look for folks who are maybe a bit smaller, a bit less confident, and those are the folks they pick on. It is unfortunate what has happened to our country's economy over the last 10 years. We have not kept up. We were more or less at parity in terms of GDP per capita with the States 10 years ago, and now we're almost 30% below them. So we have a weak economy. That weakness has been caused by the bureaucracy and red tape that has prevented us from building the 1 million homes that we need. It's been caused by our reluctance to invest in significant infrastructure like pipelines and LNG terminals and railways. It's been caused by our inability to knock down interprovincial trade barriers so that we can trade east to west, and also with our friends overseas. So my view, like I was born in the 80s, I grew up in the 90s. What I know about bullies is from the movie Karate Kid. If you're getting bullied, you go to the gym, you learn karate. And once you know that, you might not even have to punch a bully in the nose. They will stop picking on you. So I believe our economy is in a weak state. We can supercharge it, get it in a strong state, and then hopefully this menace from the South will leave us alone.
Okay, thank you. So this, you might have touched on this a little bit, but what issues and concerns are Hespeler residents bringing up most often in your conversations?
Well, I spoke about cost of living and housing, and that was the major one. Which day was that terrible snowstorm in April? Was that 2 days ago? So we knock in apartments when the weather's bad, and a woman cried at the door because she's not sure if she can stay in her home. And she said she just had her birthday. She's 51. She's not going to be making more money, and the price of rent has doubled. There was another woman about a week ago in the Fisher Mills area who told me that she and her husband, I think one is on CPP, one's on disability. They look after her elderly mother. So they're retired, they're seniors, and they're looking after another senior. And they have $4,000 a month come in the house, and their rent is $2,200. And she lives in terror that if she gets rent evicted, she'll be a senior citizen living in a car with her 87-year-old mother, and that's not right. That's been the overwhelming concern. I will say that crime has come up a fair amount, and just on my street in Old Hespeler, the street that I'm talking to you from, there were 2 cars stolen a couple months ago, and that was unheard of when I was a kid. So people have been speaking about that to me a fair amount.
Okay, perfect. Thank you. So what sets you apart from the other candidates in this election?
They seem like nice people. I'm not intimately familiar with their biographies. I'm sure that they have unique experiences as well, but I have a fair number of unique experiences myself. So I was a physician, a hospital administrator as the chief of the ICU. I've been a public health official. I'm a writer who's been internationally published. I have this experience of having maybe been the boy from the story of the Emperor's New Clothes, that I stood up for science and what was right, and stuck to my guns and my principles, and made major changes in policy that it's not my opinion, saved lives. So I think that there's a need for leadership in healthcare. I think that some of that leadership has to come through Ottawa, and I don't think anyone else is as well positioned as me to bring some of that.
Yeah. Okay. So the next question is, how does your party plan to handle economic and trade challenges, including tariffs and policies from major global players like the US?
Oh, I feel like I mostly answered that with the story of Karate Kid and the bully, and we like the answer remains we need to supercharge this economy. Of interest to folks, been Conservative Party policy for the last 4 years. A couple conventions ago, our party came together convention and passed a policy proposal called CANZUC. The idea that Canada, Australia, New Zealand, and the UK, given that we're all Commonwealth countries, speak English, we have very similar regulations, and we should have been in a super free trade agreement with these friends overseas for the last several years. And if we had linked up our economies in that way, perhaps we wouldn't be so vulnerable to the predations of what's going on down south. I like to say that the wolf is at the door, and we need to make this straw hut a brick house like yesterday.
Yeah. Okay. So what is one misconception about your party or your platform that you'd like to address? And why and then, to add to that, why do you think this misconception exists?
When people, and I've had so many wonderful conversations, and I'm not scared when people criticize my party at the door. I appreciate it. If there's something that's not sitting right with them, I like to hear about it. But it's a minority. It's maybe 1 in 20 folks want to tell me something they don't like about my party. And I'm sorry to say, they usually express that as a subjective feeling of dislike towards our leader, Pierre Poilievre. And I've tried to be as open and receptive as possible to what don't you like about him. And it seemed the word Trump-like comes up a fair amount, or the word angry or attack dog, these things. And it's bizarre to me, because he's come door knocking with me in Hespeler, and the vast majority of people who opened their doors were so happy to see him. I swear it sounds like propaganda, but I swear, and they had a videographer with them. We can corroborate it. People cried. They were so happy to see him. People gave him hugs. We knocked on one door. This was in the Silver Heights neighborhood. It was posted about on the our Hespeler Facebook page, but it came down because they're not supposed to have political content there. We knocked on one door and talked with a woman, and then we walked down and did some more doors, and then her children came down the street running to give Pierre chocolate bars. And I got to speak with him a fair amount that day, walking between doors, and he was kind and thoughtful and honest. And I know from his biography, he has a special needs child. His wife is a Latin American refugee. He has a dad who is gay that he's on very good terms with. And so I've gone to doors where people say, well, he doesn't care about marginalized voices, or he's angry all the time. And it's just so far from my experience with him. But I got to say, I don't watch very much television. And I think the way television news goes, where if you give them an hour-long speech and people decide to put a 30-second clip up, or even less, a 10-second clip up, where you maybe sound intemperate or disagreeable, that you can kind of create this pro wrestling bad guy angry image out of context. So, and one last thing, and one other thing I say to folks when they want to speak to me about his character is, I say, I'm not asking you to like him. I happen to like him. I get along with him. He's been a politician for 20 years. I'm not aware of one lie he ever told, one honest to goodness lie where he said something that was untrue. And to spend 20 years in politics and have a record like that is incredible to me. I didn't talk about the other answer to why I got into politics was I was very scandalized by the 2017 SNC Lavalin scandal. I cannot stand people telling me things that aren't true, particularly people in positions of leadership. And that was happening a lot over the last 10 years, and even during this recent Liberal leadership. So he is, whether you have a subjective sense of like towards him, at least he's honest. His record is one of honesty.
Yeah. Okay. All right. And this is a question for you specifically. So during the pandemic, your stance on public health measures led to national headlines. including your departure from Queen's University and legal support being offered from X, formerly Twitter. How do you address concerns or questions from residents who may be uncertain about your position and potentially your actions?
Well, why don't I tell them my position now, so nobody has to be uncertain?
Yeah.
I am. It's been the honor of my life to be a physician in this community for the last 13 years. I've seen thousands of patients. I've saved hundreds of lives at this point. I have vaccinations that other people haven't heard of as a hospital worker, as somebody who lived overseas for a couple of years, as somebody who did humanitarian clinics in Latin America, and as a public health official. Under my medical directive, we ran vaccination clinics and got thousands of people vaccinated. So I tried to spend not much time on what I would say social media misinformation, when anonymous people in their basements are saying things that are untrue. But I have come to understand that people are saying I'm an anti-vaccine online, and that's just the opposite of it. If you look for, I don't know, if you Google Matt Strauss, medical officer of health, Haldeman, Norfolk, you'll probably find some news articles where I was encouraging folks to get vaccinated, particularly pregnant women, particularly vulnerable people. And when I say I believe my efforts saved lives, one of the things I'm proudest of is when I came into that position, Haldeman, Norfolk had the lowest or the second lowest rate of vaccination. And when I left, we were about in the middle of 34 public health units. So I am against coercion. And in general, I said I'm for calm, compassion, courage, consent. It has been my practice as a doctor never to do anything without informed consent. Informed consent has to be voluntary. And it has been my experience that if you try to twist someone's arm into something, if you get their backs up against the wall, they're much less likely to trust you as a healthcare provider. So that was what I pursued. So frankly, it just hurts me when people say that I'm anti-vaccine or a quack or something like that. I wouldn't maintain my hospital privileges at Guelph and Grand River if I was a quack. I wouldn't have been a professor all these years. I wouldn't have retained my medical license, and I certainly wouldn't have been able to perform as a public health official with a 30% lower mortality rate than the provincial average. So that, by and large, are my views of the pandemic. And I guess I would ask people, I know there are some slanted news media articles about me that they will share, but look at what I wrote. I wrote a National Post article that I think addresses some of that misinformation, called, it has a title something like "The Left-Wing Media Was Wrong About Me." I published that in the National Post a couple of years ago, and I think those arguments and the data points and the record speaks for itself. Vis-a-vis my departure from Queen's, I have so many good friends at Queen's, physicians that I trust, physicians that I like, physicians that I'm still in contact with. Because of some of these left-wing media attacks on me, and I was critical of government policy. So in my last meeting with the dean of the Faculty of Health Sciences at Queen's, a woman who's a personal hero of mine and also from Hespeler, Jane Philpott, she said the problem was you were criticizing the government. And I was like, but it's my job as a physician and a professor to criticize the government. That's why academic freedom is in every professor's contract. So I want to hear from experts if they see something that's not right. If you're a forest ranger in Jasper and you're saying the forest fire prevention is not up to snuff, I want to hear from that person. I want that person's voice to be protected. So my lawsuit is about the administration, not the whole administration, but an element of the administration harassing me to the point that I could no longer perform my clinical duties as a physician. So, and that's okay. I have more jobs than I need. But it's that principle of, like, we have to protect whistleblowers. We have to protect academic freedom. We have to protect the little boy who says the emperor has no clothes. So that's why I'm pursuing that litigation, I would say reluctantly. And then I know there's misinformation about Twitter and Elon Musk. I have had no personal dealings with Elon Musk. Twitter has supported my claim, my litigation, but I have taken. They've offered to pay for it. I've taken zero money from them. My lawyers have taken zero money from them. I appreciate the moral support, and when I receive moral support, my mom taught me to say thank you for it. So that is that. So I don't. I honestly don't understand the concern. Any real person in the flesh that I've spoken to this about this with doesn't seem to have any concern with all of that. It is, but I know from 5 years of experience of being an outspoken public person, you are never going to make all the online anonymous trolls happy. Like never, ever, ever. And so I try to spend not too much energy trying.
Okay. All right. Perfect. All right. And this is the closing question that I've asked all candidates so far. What does Canada mean to you, and what does it mean to be Canadian? And what are you hoping Canada will look like for not only this generation, but for our children's as well?
I have a lot of answers to that question. I have historical answers, cultural answers, personal answers. I'll start with the personal. Canada is my home. This is my hometown. I was born in Canada. My dad's side came 150 years ago. My mom came as a refugee. It's a place of refuge. It's where all my cousins live. It's where my siblings live. It's where my parents live. It's where I have always lived, except for a couple years in Kuwait as a child. And I think to like be more abstract about it, about why is it my home? Why did my family come here? Why do I choose to stay here? Canada's about, our anthem says it, we're the true north, strong and free. Truth is very important to me. I said earlier that honesty mattered a lot. And we work hard. We keep this country strong. We stand up to foreign threats like the one from the south that we talked about, and we got to be free. And I think free and fair. So we have to be able to disagree with each other, but still be agreeable people. I think back to being in Hespeler Minor Softball League, and every so often, not very often, a dad would get in an argument with an umpire. And I remember one guy, I remember one dad walking away after such an argument and saying, "It's a free country." And yeah, I guess that ability to express yourself and even sometimes disagree with your neighbors about something as perhaps unimportant as Hespeler Minor Softball, or as something more important like how we're going to get through the pandemic. But those are the values that I think really define our country. And to go back even historically, I think Canada was always the freest nation. I think the United States talked about freedom, but the Parliament of Lower Canada, what is now called Ontario, is one of the very first parliaments in the world to ever ban slavery. And by no means would I say that Canada has always behaved fairly towards its Indigenous people, but I have a book on my shelf by a Western professor named I believe it's Susan Hill, about the Haudenosaunee people who live along the Grand River now. And I did not realize until I read her book, by and large, the Haudenosaunee in southwestern Ontario were refugees from George Washington's mad genocidal rampage in upstate New York. So their constitution talks about freedom, but I think we've always had freedom and peace. Historically, we maybe don't trumpet our ideals as much, but we live our ideals, and that's an important thing to me about being. I haven't even talked about the valor of our soldiers in World War II and World War I, where we got into those conflicts earlier than other overseas members of the alliance. So, and I think that speaks to being strong and free. Anyways, that was a little bit of a discombobulated answer, but it's a really, really big question. So I hope Canadians will forgive me for that.
Well, no, that's totally fair. The final question is just to kind of talk about Canada and what your vision is for it. And I think all four of our candidates care about Canada, want to see it better, and potentially there might just be there's disagreement on how to get there. So, okay, so that's all of the questions I had for you. My final question for you specifically is, if somebody has a question or says, Matt, I heard your whole interview and I still disagree with you, what is the best way for them to, get in contact with you so that way, hopefully they can learn more and then make a decision for themselves?
I want to talk to every single person who wants to talk to me. That is my goal for this 6-week election campaign or 5-week election campaign. I will, if you send me an email to matt@mattstrauss.ca, I will do my very best to give you a call. My office number is on the website, but it's just a little bit harder to schedule if I'm getting phone calls at all times. So the best way is by email. And if you'd like a phone call, I would like to call you.
Yeah. Okay, perfect. All right. Well, thank you very much, Matt, for your time today. And I wish you and the other candidates success over the next few weeks. All right.
Thank you so much for doing this.
All right.